The year is 1654. The cannons of the First Anglo-Dutch War have fallen silent. Across the North Sea, an eerie quiet descends. For the sailors who survived the carnage, it is a time for repair, for reunion, for a fragile return to normalcy. The waters, once choked with the smoke of battle and the wreckage of proud warships, now reflect the calm, gray light of dawn. But this is not the quiet of lasting peace. It is the quiet of a predator catching its breath. The sea was not at rest. It was waiting. This decade, from 1654 to 1665, is often seen as a simple pause, an interlude between two brutal conflicts. But beneath the surface of official treaties and diplomatic courtesies, a different kind of war was already being waged. A silent, relentless arms race, fought not with cannonballs, but with hammers, saws, and blueprints. In the sprawling shipyards of England and the Dutch Republic, the gears of industry never stopped turning. Peace did not slow production. In many ways, it accelerated it. Along the River Thames and the estuaries of the Netherlands, the forests of oak were systematically felled. The air grew thick with the scent of sawdust and hot tar. Armies of carpenters, shipwrights, and blacksmiths worked from dawn until dusk, their labor echoing in the rhythmic clang of hammer on iron and the rasp of saw through timber. This was the new front line. Skeletons of colossal ships rose from the slipways, their curved ribs reaching for the sky like the bones of ancient leviathans. Each new vessel was a statement, a challenge thrown across the water. The lessons of the First War had been learned, and they were costly. Victory, both sides concluded, would not be won by clever tactics alone. The next war would be decided by sheer, overwhelming scale. An arms race, undeclared but undeniable, had begun. The ships that slid into the water during this period were different. They were bigger, stronger, and carried a weight of firepower previously unimaginable. Where the First War had been fought by hastily converted merchantmen and smaller frigates, this new generation was purpose-built for destruction. Ship designers in both London and Amsterdam pushed the boundaries of naval architecture. Hulls were broadened to support extra gun decks. Masts climbed higher, designed to carry more sail for greater speed and maneuverability. But the most significant change was in the armament. Foundries worked around the clock, casting thousands of new cannons. These weren't just replacements, they were upgrades. Heavier guns that could throw a 32 or even 42-pound ball of solid iron were mounted on reinforced decks. The goal was simple: to deliver a broadside so devastating it could cripple an enemy ship in a single, thunderous volley. The English Royal Navy, under the restored monarchy of Charles II, embarked on a massive building program, producing behemoths like the Royal Charles and the Royal Oak. Not to be outdone, the Dutch, led by the brilliant statesman Johan de Witt and Admiral Mitchell de Ruyter, responded in kind, launching their own fleet of powerful new warships. The message was clear: more ships, more guns, more firepower. But building a bigger fleet was only half the equation. The First War had been a chaotic, often disorganized affair, with fleets brawling like mobs in a city street. Captains acted on their own initiative, breaking formation to chase individual prizes, leading to confusion and missed opportunities. The naval leadership of both nations knew this had to change. The period between the wars became a time of intense training and doctrinal reform. The raw, brutal experience of combat was analyzed, codified, and turned into a new science of naval warfare. Out on the open sea, away from prying eyes, entire fleets practiced maneuvers for weeks on end. Captains who had once been praised for their reckless courage were now drilled in the virtues of discipline and cohesion. A complex system of flag signals was developed, allowing an admiral to command his entire fleet with a precision that was previously impossible. On deck, crews drilled relentlessly. Gunnery practice became a ritual. Men learned to load, aim, and fire their heavy cannons with a speed and coordination that turned each ship into a floating, disciplined artillery battery. The chaos of the First War was being studied, refined, and corrected. The age of the individual sea dog was ending. The age of the professional, disciplined naval force had arrived. What emerged from this decade of preparation was something the world had never seen before: the line of battle. This tactical formation would dominate naval warfare for the next centuries. Instead of a confused melee, fleets would now approach each other in a single, rigid line, sometimes stretching for miles across the horizon. Each ship would sail in the wake of the one ahead, maintaining a precise distance. This formation maximized the devastating power of the broadside, allowing the entire fleet to concentrate its fire on the enemy line. This wasn't improvised combat anymore. It was calculated destruction, a deadly ballet of wind, sail, and gunpowder. The goal was no longer just to capture or sink an enemy ship, but to break the enemy's line, to shatter their cohesion, and to annihilate their fleet as a fighting force. This evolution marked the birth of modern naval warfare. The sea was being transformed from a lawless frontier into a carefully managed chessboard, where the pieces were 100-gun ships of the line and the stakes were national survival. As the fleets grew in power and sophistication, the pretense of peace wore increasingly thin. Diplomats in London and The Hague exchanged polite notes and toasted to continued friendship, but at sea, a cold reality prevailed. English and Dutch merchant convoys, the lifeblood of their economies, crisscrossed the globe under the watchful eyes of rival naval patrols. Captains on both sides had orders to protect their nation's trade at all costs, and encounters on the high seas were fraught with tension. A misunderstanding, a dispute over a salute, or a clash over a remote trading post could easily spark the flame of war. The Peace Treaty of 1654 survived on paper, a fragile document in a world governed by iron and oak, but trust had vanished from the sea. The oceans became a theater of suspicion, where massive fleets shadowed each other, measuring their strength, waiting for the inevitable moment when diplomacy would fail. Preparation had replaced policy. The sheer existence of these powerful new navies created its own inexorable logic. They were too expensive to maintain as mere symbols. They were built for one purpose, and one purpose only. By 1664, the calm had become a suffocating weight. The vast fleets, the product of 10 years of relentless labor and treasure, lay at anchor in their harbors, fully manned and armed. From the Medway to the Texel, a forest of masts stood silhouetted against a darkening sky. The wind was beginning to rise, carrying with it the scent of salt and the promise of a coming storm. Every sailor, every admiral, every statesman knew what was coming. The calm between the wars was not peace. It was anticipation. The sea was holding its breath.